Welcome everyone to the Eastside Freedom Library. I don't know if folks have been here before, but there are a lot of great things that happen here, including events like this. So we're glad to partner with the folks at the Ramsey County Historical Society for this event, and also subtext books by Sue. Yeah. I don't know if folks have been here before. If you haven't, I hope that you got a chance to sign in. Maybe you met Allison on your way in, who made sure that we can stay in touch with you. So the guest book is there if you haven't signed in before. The restrooms are downstairs, so there's an elevator this way and stairs that way. I don't know what else you really need to know, except that you should spend more time. Oh yeah, you need to know that there are cookies in the back table.
Are they from Cookie Cart?
They are from Cookie Cart. Yes, they're very good. I don't know if I said, my name is Clarence White. I'm the Associate Director here. We're thrilled to host this event and the writers who are going to be sharing with us. There are lots of other events. Look at the table up here and take a look at the flyers to see what's coming up. We have a lot of great things happening. So please join us for that. Bring other people to join all of these conversations, because this is a place where we have conversations, and there are a lot of people who walk through the doors with a lot of different stories, a lot of different histories that really start with the Dakota people whose place this has been for longer than any of us can imagine, and a lot of people, just about everyone else who has come through here, that have made this place what it is. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Robin, who is going to introduce the real event. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Clarence, and thank you, Peter, and everybody here at the Eastside Freedom Library. We so appreciate being able to hold events like this at this library. I love this space. Other staff members love this space, and we love coming here and having this kind of event, reading, presentation, and so forth. Back there by Sue are copies of the Ramsey County Historical Society's quarterly magazine for people to take if you're not a member. I also have a number of flyers of upcoming events, and I'm going to give you a little rundown. But first of all, I want to thank those of you who are here, who are members, and I see there are several here, and board members, and so forth. As a perk of being membership and supporting us, you're supporting these programs. We don't get grants, we don't get outside money for any of these programs. Our membership supports these programs, as well as you also get our quarterly magazine, and you get free admission to our historic site, Gibbs Farm, up in Labrador, Cleveland. And this Saturday is our very special Prairie Festival, which will celebrate the Dakota people. And our site is, it's been in contact with Dakota elders for over 20 years to make sure that we interpret the Dakota life properly. So it's going to be a great event. So coming out to Gibbs Farm at Labrador, Cleveland, and enjoy our Prairie Festival. So that's this Saturday. Then next week, on August 8th, David Page, who wrote F. Scott Fitzgerald in Minnesota, he'll be talking about the ones that got away. In other words, the buildings, neighborhoods, and so forth he couldn't include in his book because they got razed or taken down or destroyed or whatever. Then on August 20th, we're having a very special bus tour. Natalie Hennehan from the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota will be leading a bus tour that will cover just some of the WPA sites in the Twin Cities, and we'll be going to Mounds Park as well as Phelan Park. So if you're interested in that, see me. You need to have reservations for that. And then later on in September, we'll have another program here. Bill Green will be talking about his new book, The Children of Lincoln, and he's a fantastic speaker. It's a wonderful book. So come on back here on September 5th at 7 o'clock, and we'll have Bill Green do a reading and presentation from Children of Lincoln. So I want to introduce John Medeiros, who is the writer and immigration attorney, and he lives in Minneapolis. He is a 2012 Pushcart nominee for Couplets for a Shrinking World, which is published in 2012 by North Star Press, and he is the editor of the book we're talking about tonight, Queer Voices, Poetry, Prose, and Pride. And John will introduce the speakers and readers for tonight. So, John Medeiros.
I'm not sure how immigration attorney got into that file. I keep those two hats as much as I can. If my clients knew I did this, they would probably love me even more. Right? So, welcome everyone. How many of you have been to a Queer Voices reading before? Not even half of you. That's a good thing and a shameful thing. So hopefully we'll balance that as we have more readings. I'm putting on my reading glasses. That's what law school does to you. Again, that's the end of my law school career. So just a few things. I want to thank the library for hosting this event. Thank you so much. We have had a series of events throughout the Twin Cities, and we continue to have them throughout the summer and the fall. And this is the first time I've actually ever been in this library, and it's a great, great space. So thank you for hosting us today. I also want to thank there I am. I also want to thank the Minnesota Historical Society Press. Thank you, Anne. It was the press who approached us. We did not approach the press. The press came to our readings several times, and then Anne approached me and said, "You guys have some really good readers who come through here, and we need to anthologize you guys." And that's exactly how it started. So thank you for recognizing the talent, thank you for supporting the talent, and thank you for making us a permanent part of Minnesota's history and writing, if I can say that. And thank you to all the writers and the audience members who have come through the readings over the years. So how many of you have never been to a Queer Voices reading when it was at Intermediate Arts? Never been. Yeah, about half of you? Yeah, good. So just a very, very, very brief history of that. It all goes back to this lovely woman who's sitting in front of me right here, Carolyn Holdwell. Carolyn, Carolyn was correct me if I'm wrong here, the executive director of Sassy the Right Place. And Sassy the Right Place hosted a number of readings across the Twin Cities, workshops for basically disenfranchised writers who were not getting recognized in other venues. And that's what Sassy the Right Place was all about. And one of the readings that Sassy held was it wasn't called the Queer Voices. What was it called? I don't remember either, but it wasn't the Queer Voices reading, but that's what it was, right? And so around 2000, I don't know when that started. We know the history, it's in the book. If you buy the book at the table, you will know the exact date because you read about it in the introduction. But around 2005 was when Carolyn introduced me to Andrea Jenkins and asked us if we would both curate the reading series because there was a little bit of a hiatus before that happened. And so that's how it all started. At that time, the Sassy the Right Place merged with Intermediate Arts. It became the Literary Arts Programming of Intermediate Arts. And we've been doing it since Intermediate folded in 2018. So it was 13 years, nice ride, and I'll talk a little bit more about the future of that in just a moment. I do want to just read very briefly a piece of the introduction about the making of this anthology. The same spirit of community that was created by the Queer Voices reading series is responsible for the anthology you hold in your hands or you will hold in your hands before the end of the evening. Like the series, this book now assumes a vital place in the new literary canon. Queer Voices, Poetry, Prose, and Pride is the byproduct of a united community, the lush complexity of voices from the cries of gay men who have lost lovers and themselves to disease and war, to the shouts of lesbians as they meet their queer idols and still fight for basic human rights, to the whispers of defiant declarations of transgender men and women who find themselves navigating a new world, to the myriad reflections of the bisexual and gender fluid. These are the voices that make up our community. These are the new and emerging voices that still need to be heard both in person and in print. The voices featured in this anthology write to further understand this world and who we are in it. We write to embrace that understanding and to share it with others. This has been one of the most successful evolutions of the Queer Voices reading series, and one we hope will further evolve with the publication of this book. And that is exactly what this book is all about, is what the series is all about. So thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Historical Society Press, for that lovely history. So before we start, I do want to know who the four-legged usher is among us.
Orso.
What is it?
Orso.
Orso?
Yes.
O-R-S-O, not Orzo, like Orso. Okay. Very good. What I'll do is I'm going to introduce the first three readers. I do want to say that two of our readers that were scheduled to be here tonight cannot be here tonight. Nasreen Mohammed and Stephanie Crimson. I will read one of Stephanie's works tonight, and Nasreen is being scheduled for a future reading. If you want to know about future readings, visit the Historical Society Press's website. They have an events page. They're updating it constantly because we're constantly scheduling new readings. If you come to a Queer Voices anthology reading, that doesn't mean you don't go to another one, because there are different voices at each reading. So you want to make sure. In fact, somebody here has been to more than one. I won't say who, but hello. Anyway, so let me do a very brief bio of the first three readers. We'll have them read, and then I'll come back up. You'll hear me again, you'll see me again, and I'll introduce the next three. So Christina Glendenning is our first reader tonight. Hey, Christina. Yeah, give it up to Christina Glendenning, a writer and educator, has published two novels. The Rattlesnake Boat is a mystery whose main character, a homophobic detective, must rely on a transvestite prostitute to solve a murder. Now, that's not a story. I don't know what is. Searching for Gods That Desert Us is a collection of related short stories. So Christina will be our first reader tonight. Bronson Lemire, how'd I do?
That's good, it's close.
What's closer?
Lemire.
Lemire.
Yeah,
Bronson.
I was doing the military, I do this.
Bronson Lemire.
There we go, that helps people remember.
That helps, that actually helps.
See?
Bronson Lemire is the author of The Last Deployment, How a Gay, hammer-swinging 20-something survived a year in Iraq. His work has appeared in the Blue Earth Review, the Reykjavik Grapevine, and 20-something essays by 20-something writers. He lives in St. Paul. And then our third reader tonight is Morgan Grace Willow. I think Morgan is one of the few people who have read the most frequently in our series. I think, does that sound right?
This is my first one in this series.
No, I mean during the Queer
the
Voices
series.
series.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you've read several times.
Several times.
Yeah. Morgan Grace Willow's poetry titles include Dodge and Scramble, Between, Silk, and The Maps of Words. Her nonfiction has appeared in Waterstone Review, Imagination in Place, Cartography, Riding Shotgun, and Boomer Lit Mag. In 2016, Morgan exhibited her artist book, Collage for Mina Loy, at the Minnesota Center for Book Arts. So please welcome Christina, Bronson, and Morgan. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for coming. There are so many people to thank for this book that I'd use up all my time if I named everybody. So can I just do a blanket thank you? And a blanket thank you to the library, because I want to live here and have that dog be in my life. Okay.
Microphone.
Oh, okay. I work for the public schools, and you'd think you'd hear me out in the parking lot. Okay. Well, I have a short introduction, and then I'll go to my contribution. I was born in 1947, shortly after World War II. By age 15, I knew what I was. And I say what because we homosexuals were considered to be things back then. We were mistakes, not human beings. The church, the government, and the psychiatric establishments controlled our narratives of self-identity. Their power was enormous. How many messages of hate and inadequacy did I internalize growing up? My youthful psychic landscape can be likened to post-war East Germany, full of landmines, tripwires, undetonated bombs. impossible to navigate unscathed. Until I chose to trust my inner voice and not turn for help to the very institutions that tried to ruin me. To this day, I believe in no God, no government, no person who reduces human beings to diagnoses. But I do believe in words, in the power of words. The current rise of fundamentalism globally places more burden on our words, places more urgency on our community to write our stories, to understand the necessity of controlling our own narratives. So, this is the piece to love a woman. There is a difference between making love with a woman and making love with a man. And this difference is not the obvious. Genital complementarity, the fit of male parts into female parts, is touted as a natural yin and yang of life. This proof perfect is what society ladles into our empty bowls so it can garnish the sapphic love feast with shame and guilt. The truth is that physiology doesn't count for much at the end of the day. Body pales in comparison to psyche. We women possess highly nuanced psyches. Our bodies, our very souls are layered with emotional and spiritual complexities. As women who desire women, we weigh in on nuance, on the subtleties of emotions expressed and those pulsing below the surface. It is the ones that pulse that beg our special care. Will you hurt me? Will you listen to me? Will you take the time to learn my body? This is a soul language of a woman searching for a lover. Very few men pulses deeply below the surface. What is offered is three-dimensional intensity. We women run deeper. There is a dance between dimensions. When attraction hits, you create openings offhandedly, safe spaces for her to test the waters. You decipher her woman's words and ponder the possible meanings as she looks into you and through you. You follow the breadcrumb trails of interest and intent. You cover your shyness with honey-soaked shrugs and small touches. A woman opens up worlds of anticipation and hunger, worlds of need and temerity. She makes you weak, she makes you brave. Her body unmasks your desires, her vulnerability teaches you patience. By the time you connect, you are already inside her soul. But this is about the quest for love, not sex by its lonesome. This is about the connective tissue between two souls and how it is forged first from simple proximity, then from touch and murmurs in the dark. No man has ever given you that, and you marvel at how you finally made your way to her. Directness is traveling between two fixed points. This is true. But it is never a quick trip, if it's to mean anything, and it has to mean something. Nothing between women can be truly measured in straight lines. We are always spinning in arcs of varying distance to and away from each other. We are lesbians. We were born to learn the dance of arcing towards the woman we want. Then there is a sacred moment when you possess her. No touch is misplaced or inadequate. You know her body because you know your own. You are no longer trying for mutual orgasms. You want to watch her approach her release, then pull her back to need. You want to revel in what bodies do in their moment. You want to watch her face open to you wider than her arms around you. not be lost in your own desire. But it's all about afterward, after you've had your fill of one another. Then comes words as tactical as fingers. You cover each other with words like soft sheets that keep out the drafts of life. This is a soul at work, trying to create love, trying to create a home for itself. Thank you.
Hey, Bronson, I think you're up.
Hi. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the East Side Freedom Library. I actually used to live over here on the East Side, and my essay is actually set on the East Side in my first house. So it's purely coincidental. I don't think we planned this at all. It just happened to work out that way. The essay that I have in the collection is a short essay. It's a personal essay about the time I was first dating my husband. And I was trying to write a little bit about permanence and sort of perception, which is a lot of what I've been working on lately. So this essay is called Chameleon Boy. Between the wooden slats of the bookshelf in my living room, I see Donald Trump on the back cover of a comic book. He is crouching in the lower corner, an intruder poised at the edge of my life. I first noticed him a few nights ago, creeping, watching, and now I imagine him lurking in other places around my house. I imagine him in the bathroom, his sprawling face peeking out from inside the tub, behind the toaster in the onion patch, tucked inside my sock drawer. I imagine him smirking while watching me sleep. I tell this to my boyfriend, Matt. It is his bookshelf, his book. This guy, he says, pointing at the Trump lookalike, he's not even human. It doesn't matter whether the figure is human or not. I know the figure isn't supposed to look like Trump, but that is what I see. And what matters to me now is that Matt sees Trump too. I've been thinking a lot about permanence lately, how moving things become still, remain, shift into something else. This bookshelf is in my first house, my first real home after years of moving around. And Matt is the first boyfriend I've ever asked to move in with me. It feels very concrete, very settled, but also very raw. All the jagged edges of our relationship, rough and ready to harm. I worry that he won't like it here, that I won't like him here. I worry that he'll get bored. I worry about change. Him changing me changing him, neither of us changing at all. Mostly, I worry about not seeing eye to eye. Chameleon Boy, Matt says about the Trump lookalike, from the Legion of Superheroes. I know nothing about Chameleon Boy. So when he says this, I imagine a half-lizard, half-boy creature with the ability to morph into just about anything. A bird, a rocket, a billionaire with an unnatural-looking comb-over. I imagine a superhero constantly changing, never still. Someone who easily blends into his surroundings. I picture a character similar to X-Men's Nightcrawler. A creature I emulated in my 20s, with my constant moving, my non-stop wanderlust. Job to job, place to place, boyfriend to boyfriend. I never stayed with anything longer than 2 years. I morphed, changed, moved on when the camouflage wore off, when I realized I would probably never really fit in. Yeah, but doesn't he look like Trump to you? I ask. Don't you see it? I think about those ambiguous images I saw when I was a child. The ones where some people see one thing and others see something else. Once our teacher showed us a black and white figure and asked us what we saw. My classmates said they saw a young woman. I stared at the figure until I saw the woman too. Her feathered hat and billowy veil and furry coat. Then our teacher asked, "Do you see the old woman?" I squinted hard at the figure. All I saw was the young woman, her single eyelash and small nose turned away. I tried to see an old woman in the figure, but I couldn't make my eyes see what I wanted them to see. Instead of raising my hand and asking the teacher to point it out, I pretended I saw the old woman, because my classmates said they saw her, and I didn't want to be left out. Now, I want Matt to see Trump on the comic book so I can know that our relationship will work out, that I've made the right choice in asking him to live with me, that I belong in this house with him. But Matt doesn't see Chameleon Boy. It doesn't see what I see. He sees Chameleon Boy, and only Chameleon Boy. And instead of thinking our relationship is doomed and that I should run away like I've always done before, I just smile back at him and try to imagine the hazy space between being one thing and being something else. That middle ground where everything seems to float or flutter or vibrate because it doesn't know which direction it should go. Is it a young woman looking away? A shape-shifting alien? Or is it something else, something blurry and obscure, something difficult to define and pin down, something never still? Later, I ask Matt questions about the characters in the comic books he reads in bed. Animal Man, Ragman, the Creeper, so many men pretending to be something else. And we'll argue about the meaning of the term secret identity. He'll say that it refers to a superhero's civilian identity, when they aren't assuming their superhero persona, and I'll disagree. I'll argue that they're civilians first, then they become something more, take on alter egos, shift into other identities. The superhero identities are the secret identities, hidden from others, not the other way around. Matt will laugh, shake his head. He won't hesitate to tell me I'm wrong.
I want to start by adding my thanks to everyone else's, to Carolyn for spawning the series, and John, Andrea, and Lisa for conducting it all those years, Historical Society Press for this wonderful book, and this wonderful library, and of course to Orso. Thank you, Orso. We love you. I'm going to read the poems that I have in the anthology, although not in the order that they appear here. As I look around this audience, thank you for being here. What a wonderful audience you are, including the audience over there, which I love. I think everybody here probably knows who Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers are, and have maybe seen some of their films. So, this poem is called I Raise My Eyes to Fred and Ginger. I'm on the floor, working my left piriformis, trying to stretch away the sciatica that's been causing my left big toe and the one next to tingle, easing myself into pigeon pose, left knee tucked, right leg straight out behind. I lower my torso over the knee, forehead to the mat, then breathe into the tightness. Exhale. Visualize tension flowing away from the hard-to-reach muscle. But before I can stop them, today's headlines, worse again than yesterday, impose themselves. Inhale, notice them. Exhale, let them go. At the bottom of the next exhale, I sink for a moment into stillness and all my grief for the world. You can't stay here, my coach self-advises, or you'll never rise from the weight of it. So breathe. I raise my pigeon chest, arch my back, and sink into the painful left hip. Then, vertebra by vertebra, I raise my head. Finally, my eyes, the lids lifting to the eastern wall. And there they are, in the very spot where they appear every morning. Fred and Ginger, having just completed a twist, the tail end of a wide sweeping arc around the polished floor, caught in the photo at that fraction of a second before Ginger spins back the other way, her sleek gown still wrapped around her hips and knees. Fred's weight is in his left foot, his right about to step and twirl and take their swirl another direction. Such simplicity, this moment in their complex dance. We never know how many rehearsals went into this perfect pause, how much her tendons hurt in those high-heeled shoes, the crick in his shoulder from always making it look so buoyant. Whether she balked at his insistence that they do yet another take, the pressure of having to get the whole thing right because there were no second chances in the editing suite. How many millions have watched this by now, delighted by the improbability, relieved that the dance goes on, and even now that they are both long gone. Fred and Ginger dancing in their pristine backlot world, while the world outside the studio clambers out of depression toward war. So that's Fred and Ginger. So one day I was in my writing studio, and for some reason, and I don't recall the reason, I decided I needed to reread some John Barrowman poems. I don't know why I was thinking about John Barrowman, but I picked up the anthology called The Body Electric, which was an anthology, like the 50-year anniversary anthology of poems from the American Poetry Review. And so I'm flipping through, looking for John Barrowman, and I came upon another poet whose name is Stephanie Brown. What you need to know about her before we start is that it turns out she's not only a poet, but she's a librarian. And she's a different Stephanie Brown from the one you may be thinking of. So the title of this poem is, On My Way to John Barrowman, I Discover Stephanie Brown. I'm thumbing through The Body Electric, searching for John Barrowman poems when the title Schadenfreude captures my eye. Of course I must stop, read. A simple syntax, like piles of laundry, clean but not yet folded, stacks separated by color and textile, leaning into just dishevelment. Yet the pattern is clear as Saturday afternoon and just that simple. A heap of clauses, one stacked upon another, tossed like the white sock toward its mate that somehow got mixed up with t-shirts, green, gray, indigo. One doesn't expect a librarian to toss off such languid, wry lines, Marianne Moore notwithstanding, each one stretching far across the page. Blunt narratives about getting high and having hippie sisters, shredding cliches like Yosemite Sam with his machete. But wait, Yosemite Sam doesn't have a machete. He has 6 shooters. I looked it up. And that's the kind of thing Stephanie Brown would do. That direct admission, spoken straight to the reader, as if you sat across her on a red Formica table, its chrome legs curving down from each corner, little rubber booties on the bottoms to prevent scuffing the recently polished Armstrong tile floor, shining bright, no waxy buildup. You're drinking cherry cokes, smoking Marlboros in this second-floor college apartment. The ashtray fills up while jelly beans gather in a green Melmac bowl. You're wearing cutoffs, frayed fringes dancing the circumference of your thighs, though Stephanie's in striped pedal pushers, and a neon pink halter top. It's dawn by now. The two of you simultaneously notice the pinkening sky in the rectangular window between faded chintz curtains above the kitchen sink, which is full of dirty plates and silverware. A Pizza Hut box sits on the pink counter tiles nearby. That's what it's like, reading a Stephanie Brown poem. Now I wonder whether she scribbled across a yellow legal pad, like this one, on her desk in the library, a stack of manila acquisitions folders ready to provide cover when her secretary taps at the office door to announce the next interview, or carries long reams of spooled computer paper, the balance sheet needing to be proofed before copies can be made for the board, which meets tonight. And just before I flip the pages, move on to John Barrowman's Henry and Recovery poems, I imagine Stephanie Brown as heroine in a Roy Lichtenstein comic book. Her blonde hair, her elegant calligraphy eyebrows above dark eyes, each of which leaks one perfect tear. It drips to her skin-tight red bodice, bearing angular black letters, S.P., mild-mannered librarian by day, super poet in the interstices of night. Now I'll conclude with this one, The Way It Is. Much turning through the swirl and churn each day brings. The story we cobble out of shells and repetitions, our individual planet, the way my orbit differs from yours, the way the border defines both outside and in, the way any circle that seems cut is never really broken. Thank you.
How are we doing so far? Yeah? Those you were in for a treat. We're halfway through. How are you doing back there? So, one of the fun parts about being in my role is I get to sort of direct the evening. So I get to make changes without telling you all ahead of time. I love that. No, we have two readers who are not with us tonight, Nazreen Muhammad and Stephanie Christman. And I know Stephanie threw her back, Nazreen threw her back out. I don't know about Stephanie. I don't know if you, Anne, do you know? But I know that she canceled. So we have two more readers, but we happen to have a plan when these things happen. So this anthology is made up of 44 different voices. And among those voices are people who used to live in Minnesota who no longer live in Minnesota. And we honor them because they came through the series and we celebrate them. And in that spirit, I would like to read two pieces by one of the writers who is not in Minnesota anymore, but has lived here, was here for several years. How many of you know Ann Tweedy? 3 people, 4. Ann Tweedy, actually, I met Ann Tweedy when she was when I was in law school, she was a law school professor there. And I approached her, and she approached me and said, "What kind of reading you read about?" And I thought, And so next thing we knew, she was with us. So Ann Tweedy's full-length book, The Body Alphabet, was awarded a Bisexual Book Award in Poetry and was a Lambda Literary Award finalist and Golden Crown Literary Society Award finalist. She's published 2 chapbooks and has since been twice nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She also serves as an attorney for Indian tribes and is a widely cited legal scholar. So I want to read 2 pieces of her because she's just, I miss her dearly. I miss her and I miss her writing, and she's a wonderful person. So I will read 2 of her pieces and then we will do the other 2 readers tonight. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
With you? Okay. Anatomy of a Name. Her name is Ann Tweedy. You have to know that in order to get the poem. Anatomy of a Name. My name, the first, something no one would make fun of, my mother said, and plain, not because she was looking for plain, but because we are plain, the people I come from, New Englanders and upstate New Yorkers, plain without meaning to be plain or thinking about plainness, but plain just the same. That makes plain the lack of an E, the other Anne of Green Gables, was so proud of, her saving grace, so to speak, saving her from utter plainness, and Anne, without the E, means grace after all. No doubt snobbery was part of it. My first and middle names, the names of queens, and as one lover put it. And my last name, the name of a river. I used to tell the kids who made fun of me, a Scottish river. My cousin of the same name laughed at the logic of telling taunting children they were misreading my name. It had no cartoonish T near the end. Even back then, I thought knowledge might save a person. Of course, I got my name from my father, and when I married, had to ponder if it was mine enough to hold on to, but I figured by then I'd co-opted it, having lived with it and fought for it, even though, as my grandfather's name, it emblemed family pain. My mother looked down on made-up names, a poor person who contrived to seem rich. She saw made-up names and altered spellings as inescapable. I went along at first, but gradually grasped my plain name and my cartoon name as undeserved legacy, a kinship with history. Instead of slaveholders' names or names doled out to Indian families during allotment, each family's easiest first name recast as a surname, names of oppressors, or chosen by them, born into the future of each new baby, undone at last by names sprung from sound, an act of freedom to disown plain people like me. And then she's got a very short piece, a short essay in here, and I'm just going to admit, when we were reading the
Submissions.
thank you, I was thinking contributions, and that's not quite the word I want, submissions. Thank you, editor. When we were reading the submissions, this piece came by, and it brought me to tears. And so I told Anne that when I got the chance, I was going to read this. So she's very well aware of this. It's called Rental Property. How many of you, well, I hate going back to law school, but let me just say this. There are some lawyers in the house, I know, or ex-lawyers in the house. Property law is probably the most complicated class to take in law school, because it goes back to old ancient concepts of property. We're not talking real estate. So this is, and she taught that, and this is called rental property. When my mother was evicted from public housing, I was in my 40s, living 1,500 miles away, but I felt like it was happening to me. Did I have bad boundaries? Or had I never gotten over my childhood fear that she and I would lose the house we lived in because she didn't pay the bills? Maybe both. I was teaching property law when she was evicted from hoarding, and it happened during the time I was teaching landlord-tenant law. Bitterly funny, I thought the eviction violated the Fair Housing Act. She has an obvious disability, but her legal services lawyer wouldn't raise the objection. The lawyer thought it wouldn't be fair to the other side, the town housing authority, which had, quote, bent over backwards. So I tried to get a reasonable accommodation request as a family member, but I don't know if the judge read it. And anyway, she was evicted, and the social worker assigned to help her started up on some tough love bullshit, arguing that my mother wasn't cooperating because she wasn't at her apartment when the social worker arrived a few minutes early for her appointment. My mother had stepped out to do laundry. And so she wouldn't support my request for my mother to have more time in the apartment before leaving, which meant the other side wouldn't agree to it. I got the news that the eviction went through right before teaching my property law class. And I tried very hard not to cry standing at the front of the big law school lecture hall. Later, the minister who had helped clean out the apartment for my mother got her committed, concerned that she had the body of her dead cat in an empty refrigerator. My mother loves cats. She told me once when I was a child and asked me that she didn't, and asked her that she didn't know if she loved me or the cat more, which is a clear answer to the question, she loved the cat more. I don't know why children ask such questions. Now, when my own son asks them, do you love me more than the cats? Do you love me more than blank? I know the answer. The answer is always yes. You have to hear, I don't know, once only, to know to say yes to that sort of question forever after. Yes, 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 without any hesitation, without stopping to think about it. So our next two readers are Michael Kiso Moore. I'm looking for you, Michael. These names. You're in here, I know you are. There you are. Where are you?
152.
Yeah. No, I thank you. Now I have to learn how to count. Michael Keith-Seymour is the award-winning author of the poetry collection, What to Pray For. His work has appeared in several books and journals. He founded the Birch Bark Book Reading Series, and he dances with the Ramses Braggart's Morris Men. And after Michael will be our final reader, William Reichardt. William, your bio is remarkably short in this anthology, but it could be an anthology in and of itself. William Reichardt is the author, editor, and educator. His sixth poetry collection, The Night Horse, New and Selected Poems, was published by Bright Horse Books in 2018. Please welcome Michael and William. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you, John, for everything you do. And thank you so much for Minnesota Historical Society Press, not only publishing this, but they have been so enthusiastic about this publication and getting it out into the community. It's been considerable, so thank you. So the piece I have in here is about travels I take to visit my family in Wisconsin, and it's a very long car trip, and this is about something that happened on one of those trips. The day I recognized that the country turned against me again. It was an unpleasant feeling. Been a while since I felt this. I was driving across Wisconsin, returning to my home in St. Paul from a visit with family. I stopped for gas. As I walked from the convenience store, I saw that I was surrounded by men almost twice as large as me, wearing orange hats and hunter camouflage green. Suddenly, I was conscious of my car's human rights campaign and rainbow-colored peace sign bumper stickers. I wore a long Italian black winter coat and a dapper maroon-colored scarf. The thought arrived, all these men probably voted for Trump. I did not feel safe. I remembered a time many years ago when a man brandished a knife at me saying, "I'm going to kill the faggot." That was not likely to happen here at a gas station parking lot, but I did feel eyes upon me. I felt noticed, thoughts running through these men's heads that I was not one of them. This is not my country anymore, again. So I'm going to follow that with a few poems. The first is from my first book of poetry called What to Pray For. And this poem is called Piazza La Tengo. A street musician plays his bandoneon, pushing and pulling his accordion bellows. The music sighs, it wails, it cries out, tango. Two men, capadritos, rush to the street, join hands, male hip pressed to male hip, and the man danced the tango. The street is Buenos Aires. It is the year 1900, and the tango is forbidden. Women gasp as the street thieves dance, cheek to cheek, arms stretched to the limit. Not that two men dance, who cares about that, but they dance the tango. A priest makes the sign of the cross. Children's eyes are covered by anxious hands. The two men hold each other tight, step through the boundaries. If you will not see how life should be lived, shut your eyes to the tango. The husbands, listening to wives, exclaim, watch longingly, if only they could tango. The music swells, pitches higher, the men throw themselves at each other. Is it a fight or is it dance? Watch as they flame the tango. If you will not live dangerously, why live at all? Tango. Thank you. So I'll give you two more poems. The next is from my forthcoming book, which is called The Song Castle. I have the galleys here. I'm still correcting them. And the first one, oh yeah. So not too long ago, I went to a lecture at the American Swedish Institute. The lecture was about mythical creatures in Scandinavia. And in that evening, I learned about a very interesting creature called the Necken. And then this poem arrived. All these years, I thought I was immune. That would never happen to me. I walk through the woods and a wood nymph jumps out. Honey, I say, please put something on. At the stream, a water sprite emerges, revealing her breasts. Girlfriend, you're not my type. Over time, I hear the stories. The men, overcome by desire, dragged to cursed realms. Sometimes a woman succumbs too. I'm not the only gay one walking these woods. And then it happened. One day, I hear a man's voice humming a tune. So lovely, the trees themselves bow to listen. I glance down at the river. An inhumanly beautiful man lounges on some rocks, naked. He stands and steps into the water, calling me to join him, his silvery arms outstretched. Then, by some magic, a violin appears in his open hands, and he begins to play. The manly beauty of his body is enough. Desire fills my soul until there is nothing left of me but want. And his music, why does he have to play so divinely? Do they tell a story of a man who walked in the woods and fell in love with a beautiful Necken and then was never seen again? I hope when they finish telling the story, the man ensnared says he has no regrets. So I will finish with a poem that's called The Song Castle, which is the poem that gives the title to my book. So I give you The Song Castle. I want to build a song sturdy as a castle with rooms. It must have rooms. A room that can hold Lorca's full moon rising. A room for Whitman's countless leaves, fecund and green. A room so vast enough to hold the rage of Achilles, and to another to hold the fall of Troy. And we can give Wilfred Owen that room, for it will be large enough to hold, too, the pity of war. Once we fill all these rooms, can we finally find room enough for love? First, we must find the lost key, dropped so many times it is a wonder it has any form at all, or held so fast by some, it can only be removed by the white, nimble fingers of death. Let us then make prodigious rooms for love and hand out the keys prolifically to all who deserve one, and more so to the ones who do not, for this is not a love song like all the songs. And when we finish building this great edifice, it will beat in the deep heart of this cold, cold world, and the song will suffuse every living being, and you will be held. All manner of living beings will be held, and no one will ever be alone again. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for hosting us. The library is wonderful. And thanks to the Historical Society for the book, and to John and the other editors. So I'm just going to read a couple of the pieces that are in the book. The first one I'll do is from a new manuscript I've got. It's roughly called Midwest Landscape, and it's a bunch of prose poems. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And so this one is called Midwest Landscape, The First Man. He'd been the mayor for 30 years, town veterinarian, mentor of fatherless boys. He took them along in house calls to isolated farms to treat sick cattle, injured dogs, or drove them to town to buy their first suits for prom or graduation. After the sheriff found him dead, the top of his head opened up to the sky, shotgun still in his hands. Each secret he thought he'd kept began to speak. How many had there been since he'd moved to town? Whose sons were so ashamed of what he'd done to them they could never speak it, had buried it so deep it finally spilled out in closed fists, stolen prescriptions. Scandal in a small town where most are related by marriage or blood can tear up the peace apart, but a good town knows how to silence its own. The residents willed themselves to forget. Still, he'd named each street in the new subdivision after his children. Once the truth was revealed, nobody knew what to do. In the end, the street names remained, but no one mentioned that man again. I suppose anyway. Let's see here. This one is called Perfect. And Jim is here and I doesn't particularly care for this poem. So, hold on. Okay, perfect. Okay. Nothing is perfect except perhaps the ice. The way it quietly cracks as the waiter fills my water glass. In the sun, filtering down through the newly emerged locust leaves, refracts in the cold fissures and turns a simple glass into a vessel full of light. None of us has a right to expect perfection. It's rarely there, and to expect it is to sacrifice the honest joy we feel when it's achieved. My eyes, for instance, are not flawless, nor his chin, nor my hair. Our shirts are generally wrinkled, our clothes frumpy, and the food we eat is only routine, despite the pristine reputation of the restaurant upon whose patio we now sit, despite the outrageous cost of everything on the menu, despite our unspoken hope that the food will be sublime. This isn't April in Paris, it's May in St. Paul. The beautiful tulips that border the walls or on the patio seem to strive for transcendence but cannot achieve it. The scent of the newly thawed earth does not give off a perfume bouquet, but it's pungently familiar and comforting. What's perfect is the fact that the sun has traveled back to us again, and it dazzles me as it fills my glass, and I can see for a moment all that's possible. I'm going to read this one. Sometimes I write poems that I don't necessarily intend to read out loud. I think other people should, but anyway, this one's called President Fabulous. I don't think this new president is mine. Maybe the last one was, but now he's out on the links puttering away what's left of his life. I don't know if there was ever been a president for me and my kind. Who is the president of all us little sissies? Who is president of all us tomboys, tough women, weak men? For all of us strung so beautifully along the sexual continuum, every one of us gendered, non-gendered, quasi-gendered, multi-gendered, omni, all, everything in between gendered. Who is the president of the queers? Who is the leader of our free queer world? I know this new president is not. I know he's not the president of anything other than the art of the bad deal, art of the steal, art of the oligarchy of privileged white men with no imagination and too much cash. He's not my president if he can't shake his hips, won't put his lips on any part of another man, won't raise his legs above his head in that last sweet salute. I want a president of the United States of the diaphanous, the United States of the dangerous, the United States of the dull, the fascinating, the genius, and the dumbfounded. A president of the boys, the girls, the women, the ladies, the great, the small. A president for all of us who know, in the current administration, we have no voice. And I'll just close with, this is a poem about Frankenstein, just to admit that when I was a senior in high school, our English teacher gave us a choice. We could read Catcher in the Rye or Frankenstein. All of my classmates picked Catcher in the Rye, and I read Frankenstein. I didn't know anything about it. I'd only seen, the Boris Karloff film version or versions. But when I finished reading it, I kind of realized that I thought it was more than anything else a love story. I mean, a love story between Frankenstein and his friend in medical school, and then the doctor he works with, and then ultimately Frankenstein and the man he makes. And I had these thoughts long before the Guthrie put on Frankenstein Playing with Fire a year or two ago, because you might recognize the plot has similarities to that play, which was incredible. But the monster addresses his maker on the night of his nuptials. You have fled so far from me that you've run out of land. You've tried to cross over the top of the world with your bride. You failed. The moment you gave life to me, you became my beloved. I'm the product of your rib, Adam born from Adam. You might know her body, might possess it momentarily, but you created me, birthed me from the refuse of the dead. My arms were always meant to embrace you. In her cabin, she lies cold as snow, too fragile to survive this rough world. But my hide is thicker, my body equal only to yours. See the glacier field, how it stretches on for miles, disappears into the mouth of the sky. I made a wedding chamber there for the two of us. When they drove me from the village, I learned to live among the trees. Now I crave stillness. When your legs grow too tired to walk, I'll carry you. There in the ice, we'll find our perfect balance and make our marriage bed our grave. And that's it.
So let's get a round of applause for all of our readers. Thank you to the readers. Thank you to the Eastside Freedom Library. Thank you again to the Minnesota Historical Society Press. Thank you to Intermedia Arts, which is no longer among us, but it's with us in spirit and in memory. And thank you to Carolyn for starting this entire amazing journey. Thank you. Before you leave, before I dismiss you for cookies, I want you to be aware of some upcoming readings that we have for this anthology. Again, if you go to the website of the Minnesota Historical Society Press, look up Queer Voices, the anthology. There's an events tab, and just so, since you're all sitting there with your calendars out and the pen at the ready, I'll just tell you, the next reading scheduled is Thursday, August 29th. And that will feature Lisa Marie Brimmer. Lisa is one of the co-curators of the reading series. She sort of joined Andrea and me for the last 2 years at Intermedia Arts, and she's also one of the co-editors of the anthology. Lisa Marie Brimmer, Julie Gard, Venus DeMars, Gary Peter, who is with us in person and in spirit, and Katie Robinson. That reading will take place in Duluth at Zenith Bookstore. And then there's a reading scheduled for Thursday, September 12th at Bone Shaker Books in Minneapolis. Cole Bauer, Ryan Berg, Stephanie Mari Booker, Anthony Ceballos, Kelly Frankenberg, and S. Yarberry will be reading with us. And then we have one scheduled for Friday, September 20th at Quatrefoil Library, and we're still working on the lineup for that. And there are a couple of other readings that we're putting together both in Minnesota and outside of Minnesota, so keep up to date by visiting the website. So, what happens now with this series? Well, we are still ironing that out, but I'm very confident that the reading series will revive, and we're looking at that happening sometime in the fall. And I can't give much more detail than that because we're still ironing it out, but keep your eyes and ears and everything attentive. And with no further ado, I will encourage you to buy books. We've got books at the back there that you're selling, correct? We've got books at the back, so buy them, read more of what you heard tonight. There are cookies back there still, and mingle. Thank you for being here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings as well.